Okay, good evening, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces and some other faces that I don't think I've seen recently or seen before. Thanks for joining our session tonight, and thank you for accepting the invitation. I know it was at quite short notice. I think it was sort of late December that we sent this out. I will run through the agenda, some housekeeping, and some usual sort of standard meeting information. We'll do some introductions as well. As I've already said, we're recording today's session just so that we can obviously make sure that we are taking all the feedback that's discussed today down, and turning that around into sort of a summary of actions and feedback notes that we can share with you after the meeting. So just a really quick bit of background to this. So as you know, we're still in the middle of our non-stat consultation. We have about 3 more weeks left. It concludes on 24th of January. So we're still running quite a few events at the moment. We felt that it was very important to meet with as many of the impacted parish and ward representatives across the route that now fall under the sort of red line boundary, the draft order limits. So that is very much those areas where the proposed route sort of impacts directly. So that's like a slight change from the usual sort of LRG groups that you would have been used to previously. We have 15 groups across the route, and those groups are quite large, including lots of parishes and wards that sort of neighbour again. In this part of the consultation, it's very important that we're talking to those that are directly impacted. So hence why we have designed 7 sessions, which have been divided up as per how we work across the route, and the first tonight. So that's just a bit of background as to why we are doing it the way we're doing it at the moment. As for the future of the LRGs, we still will be very much coming together with the wider groups. That will be in a format which is undecided at the moment, but these sessions in particular, so these feedback sessions, we will certainly be coming back to you in a few months' time, and they will be in person. Very important to make that clear. We will be doing these in person. It was just not feasible to try and do that in the middle of a consultation, where we have just a lot going on at the moment. So I do appreciate your understanding on that. If I could have done, I would have done, but it was just impossible. So we are going to muddle through and do this online this evening, do our very best with you. This isn't the only way to provide feedback. Obviously, we have seen many of you at the events. There's still more events to come. There is the online consultations, the online feedback routes, and the paper feedback documents, which we still strongly encourage that everybody completes. These sessions are just very much to get into a bit more detail of the sort of local area that you all represent. Okay, I think we can move along, Charlie. So just a quick sort of look at the agenda this evening. As I said, we'll do some introductions of who is here to run the session for you this evening. In addition, it would be great if all of the parish councillors and ward councillors could just pop your name into the chat box, and just with your name and who you're representing, just so that we can get a clear picture of who's joined us tonight. That would be very useful. Thank you. You can do that. We will then hand over to one of our DCO members of the team, looking at the development consent order. She will be covering where we are on the project so far. John Cornwall will then be looking at the workshops themselves, looking at the update on proposals, and then we will be working through the design feedback sessions. So we've got quite a lot to cover this evening. I'm going to be chairing the session. I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to provide their feedback, to raise anything they wish to do so. In the interest of time, if I feel like we're labouring over a point for a very long time, I will try and move us on as best I can, just so that everyone gets an opportunity to really sort of say what they need to say. But as I say, this isn't the only chance you'll have to provide your feedback. But fab. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, I'm the Senior Engagement Manager for the local representative groups. This evening we also have Siobhan and John that some of you have met before. We have Katie Dixon from our environmental team, Ben Nicholas from the traffic transport planning team, senior manager there. Adam, who's our engineering manager, working very closely with John, and I guess you've probably met at some of the events if you've been to any of them recently. We have Jack Garrett, who's again one of the Cambridge area managers. So very quick intros. You will be meeting all of these people throughout the rest of the evening. As always with these events, it's a virtual meeting, we're recording it, and we will have a transcribe just to help us summarise and write up the notes from today's session. Thank you for putting your names and parishes in the meeting chat. I can see that's in there. I would suggest you can absolutely put questions in the chat box that you have about anything this evening, but I think it would be even better if you raise your hand and we can get to you that way. But anyone we don't get to, please feel free to put it in the chat and we'll certainly come back to you. So that's the housekeeping. And I'm now going to hand over to, well, before I do, does anybody have any questions on any of what I've just said before I move us on? Okay. So I'm going to hand over to Siobhan, who's going to give us a bit of an update on the project and where we are. Thanks, Siobhan.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Siobhan Adeleke, and I am the DCO Statutory Stakeholder Engagement Manager. So just a really quick overview of the development consent order process. As you may know, it is a bit of a lengthy progress, and there's clear set stages of the process to work your way through. And as you can see from this slide, I appreciate it's a little bit small, but as you can see from this slide, we are still very much at the early stages. We're at the pre-application stage of the process. And so as part of the development consent order, we are required to deliver a statutory consultation. And so we've taken the approach to work up our designs and start off with what we're currently in, which is the non-statutory consultation, and then follow up potentially, we're hoping towards the later part of this year to launch a statutory stakeholder consultation for you to see the revised designs following from the consultation. And so the way you take part in this section of the application is to respond to the consultations and to engage through the groups, the LRG groups that Sarah outlined in the beginning. And then we have to then submit our application after the pre-application process, and there's an acceptance phase which lasts around 28 days. Anyone can go on to the National Infrastructure Consenting Planning website to check the status of the application and whether it's been accepted or not. And then we will be moving into the pre-examination stage. And so this is where anybody that's interested, that's directly affected, can be registered as interested parties and register their interest in the process. And so that further down the line in the examination page, then those interested parties, registered interested parties, can then have the opportunity to make written submissions and speak at public hearings, but the planning inspectorate hold to go through the proposals of the applications. So the examination period lasts roughly around 6 months, and through that period, the examining authority will then go through all the applications. They'll be asking questions, and they will have the public hearings, and any interested parties can make representations at those public hearings. And we will be throughout this whole period from pre-application right up to examination, we will be engaging with our interested parties and with all of our statutory stakeholders to make sure they're, one, aware of the process, and two, that they're happy with how we've engaged and their input that they've put into the process going forward. And then we expect a decision roughly 6 months afterwards. and the examining authority will make a recommendation to the Secretary of State, who then will decide on the status of the project. And again, you can check the planning authority, National Infrastructure Planning website to check on the status of the project. And then finally, we have the post decision, which is roughly around 6 weeks. And that's when, once a decision is made, there's the 6-week period where anyone who has any objections or anything to say can make a representation, and that's known as judicial review. So it is it's a lengthy process, and it has clear set processes and stages, and as I say, we are right at the beginning. Despite all the lovely work that's been going on and all the engagement that's going on, we are still at the beginning. So there's a long way to go yet, and it's really clear to outline what the road, what the pathway is ahead for this development consent order. Can we have the next slide, please? So this slide just outlines where we are with the current consultation. We do have a bit of a video, if you'd like to take us through. There we go. We're not getting sound.
I suggest you just pop the link to that video into the chat for people to see. It's available on the website, and I'm sure people have seen that already, so we can just skip this.
Okay, fine. It is available on YouTube. So yeah, we can absolutely put the link to that in the chat. Okay, where were we? As Sarah said, we are just over halfway through our non-statutory consultation. We still have a series of events coming up. 6 events left coming up until the end of January. If you haven't had an opportunity to get down to one of our events, I do encourage you to come down, see our plans blown up a bit bigger on boards, and speak to our experts directly. Also a note to say that the GIS shapefiles and draft order limits, safeguard and draft order limits are now available on the website for anybody to take a look through in detail. That's it. Next slide. So now I'm just going to have a little bit of an introduction to the workshops and how we are planning to run them over the next couple of weeks. So I think it's really important to set out from the beginning the scope and a bit of a term of reference. We are really seeking your feedback on the current design and optionality that's set out within the non-statutory consultation. And so we're looking for feedback on community benefit and impacts, things like land and property requirements, environmental and sustainability intelligence that you can give us on your local areas, construction and logistics, traffic and transport, door-to-door connectivity and active travel. Because of time, we're not going to be discussing other route options that have been shared historically or that we've already moved past, or any works outside of this current scope. If you do wish to kind of talk on these topics, we can do it in a separate format. But these workshops are specifically designed to gather feedback on the current proposals that we have out on non-statutory consultation. So we're recording this session, and we will be listening really carefully to the issues raised, and we'll be working with our design teams to make sure those issues are channeled through the design change process. We will be sharing the feedback that's raised in this session with you. However, it's really important to understand that the discussions that we have here are not the formal consultation response. We do encourage you to go on and make a formal consultation response as part of the formal channels. We do have information about those channels on our website and at events. You can make written responses via our free post address. You can do it on our website online, and you can do it by handing in a feedback form at a consultation event. So we are listening, we are taking note of what you're saying today, but this does not count as a formal consultation response. And the reason we do that is to make sure there's consistency with how we gather feedback from our stakeholders, and make sure that there's no ambiguity around what has been said. It's really important that you make your representations yourself. Next slide. So as I say, the purpose of this workshop is to discuss the detail with you. It's an opportunity for you to input your ideas and your feedback, and to really gain clarity on areas of the design, and perhaps our rationale on why we've designed it that way. The workshops are designed to be interactive, so we are looking for feedback from you, and going back and forth on particular issues and items. And so please do feel free to ask questions and give your input. We're doing this on purpose within the consultation period, so it gives us an early opportunity to understand your thinking, and also gives you an opportunity to ask questions about the design before you make your own representations. We are also running these workshops with our local authorities. We've done some already, and there will be some over the next few weeks as well. We met the Cambridge local authorities on the 9th of December, and they gave us a lot of good information. Ones that you may be interested in is it spoke about the connectivity for local villages, and particularly how do we connect Newton and Harston, and how to use the design to encourage active travel routes, wider active travel considerations, legacy. There was a lot of talk about the legacy of the project and communities, and how we might extend that legacy beyond just designing a railway. How do we make sure that local communities are benefiting, particularly where they're not directly located close to a station. A big topic was environment, so particularly around flood mitigations, and other environmental topics. So we are talking with our local authorities, and there will be other local authority workshops over the next few weeks in other areas of the route, and we are making sure that we are syncing up what is said locally and what is said from local authorities, and making sure that they're equally fed into the design. Next slide. Now I'm going to pass over to John Cornwall to have a bit of an update on the proposals.
Thanks, Siobhan. Hi, everyone. So there's a few slides here. I don't propose to dwell on them necessarily, given the feedback in the chat that some people are finding it hard to read them. What I would propose to do is move to the online interactive map, which is available to everyone, but does convey the proposals in quite a lot of detail as per the consultation. And then perhaps literally just go along the route, covering the main areas of the infrastructure for each parish, and hopefully guided by Sarah in terms of timekeeping to try and get through all the elements in the remaining hour and 40 minutes. Does that work for everybody if we do that approach? Rupert?
Yeah, sorry, I've got a quick question. When
Sure.
do we ask questions? Because we got questions cropping up in my mind already.
Well, and I think that's the whole purpose of this session, isn't it? To try and answer as many of your questions as possible. So please start, and please keep them coming. I don't necessarily have an agenda other than the optionality we've included in the consultation to raise to you, and hopefully to convey the proposals more clearly in terms of having me and the engineering experts here for your questions. So please do fire away.
Well, can I kick off then by asking one key one? I think in the options you've derived, we're now considering, you've arrived at some preferred routes as dictated by East West Railway. How have you arrived at those preferences? Because I know the criteria you use, but I don't see the weighting. I mean, we might locally give a lot more weighting to active travel than you may do.
So, I mean, that goes back to June of last year, the route update report and the technical information that's provided in that. We've not really moved on from there in terms of any more work on the. I presume you're alluding to the northern approach to Cambridge.
No, not necessarily. I'm alluding to the routes around Harston as on the current plans. We've got options 1 and 4. 2 and 3 have seemed to have been disregarded already. So I don't understand how you're choosing between 1 and 4. You've stated a preference, but not on any criteria, not on any weighted criteria that I can identify.
Did you have you heard of Adam?
So where we have had a number of options that have come out of the design team for comparison against a baseline, so the baseline that we would have taken from a couple of years ago, we apply, I think it's 14 assessment factors that we apply to that assessment against the various features and knock-on impacts that particular design option would propose. The weighting is, or the categorization of said assessment factors, split into 5 sections. So your baseline takes a neutral position, and then all other options are assessed against that baseline, whereby against those, I think it's 14, isn't it, John? Those 14 areas, the design option either proposes a minor improvement or a major improvement, or a minor worsening or a minor worsening. If it's perceived that actually there is no worsening or no improvement, that particular factor is for that given option is assessed as neutral. So when we, for example, for the Newton-Harston connectivity piece, indeed we had 4 options that we developed. Each of those options are available, I believe, in summary of them in the technical note, which comes as part of the non-statutory consultation materials, also available online. We looked at the various factors stemming from benefits to rail operations, capital expenditure, environmental impact of construction and logistics, so on and so forth. We then used a team of subject matter experts across East West Rail and our partners to then assess each of those options, so, in those 14 categories, and determine whether or not there would be a major or minor worsening or benefit. And then that's what you then also see a summary of that in a matrix table in the technical report. And then from that, there's of course backing evidence and information that supports why it would be scored as a major or minor benefit or disadvantage. And then from a subjective assessment based on the balance of all of those, there would then be, in some cases, a clear preference or a clear winner, and in others, it might be a little bit tighter. So either that then triggers further work, or a position that is taken based upon the most critical and what perceived to be important stages to East West Rail. So typically environment and local benefit, as well as rail benefit to rail systems.
As I hear it, then all 14 categories get equal weighting, do they?
It's not weighted across the 14 categories per se, so there isn't a direct weighting for each of those categories. So you could argue that there is a broadly equal weighting to those. Yeah.
And it's done by basically EWR staff.
and expert consultants and subject matter experts in their field. Yeah. So, for example, an environmental expert would undertake the environmental assessment. An operations expert would undertake the operations assessment, maintenance, so on and so forth. Would be taken by the lead experts, of course, with consultation from various other, whether it's stakeholders in the case of Network Rail and rail operations, for example.
Right. Okay. We continue. Because I've got one final question I better ask. What's the weighting you give to freight impact rather than passenger impact?
As far as the assessment factors are concerned, again, there's no significant weighting to either of them. Of course, freight is one of the sub considerations within the general operations, and it is acknowledged for the future growth of freight across the general corridor, inclusive of using the East-West Rail route. But typically, there is no plan for significant enhancement, particularly in this Cambridge area. Therefore, it's passenger benefit and benefit to passenger operations is what takes precedence in our assessment factors.
So the experts that have been used are principally passenger experts rather than freight experts.
They're operations experts, so a railway is mixed usage. So they have expert knowledge in both fields. Because
in the case of Harston, sorry if I crack on a bit on this, but it gives an idea. You crack on if you look at the case of Harston, we've elevated the road, the A10, and you've elevated the old existing SBR line to a greater extent than was originally planned if you go back a year and a half. So have we assessed the impact environmentally of that move?
So in the last year and a half, through again assessment factors processes, we've lowered the height of the railway, both the SBR and EWR lines, because previously the EWR lines went over the A10. So the whole junction infrastructure over that area was significantly elevated. We've now reduced that down to ground with the A10 going over East-West Rail. So that is a significant benefit, both in terms of construction, logistics, environment, and of course capital expenditure.
Sorry, I don't agree with you. I fundamentally disagree that if you elevate the height of the A10 and the SBR line, that's a negative to me.
So
because they carry more freight and more traffic than the EWR line.
As far as the gradients are concerned and tolerances for highways, so roads versus rail, your gradients, you can get substantially steeper gradients, therefore reduce the footprint of overall infrastructure interventions by having road go over rail rather than rail go over road. Rail going over road, you would have a significant elevation of the railway all the way from Hawkston Junction across the A10, continuing up north towards Barrington and Chapel Hill, versus it being at ground level. So the amount of construction, earthworks, the amount of land required in order to elevate the railway would be substantially higher, to an order of magnitude of dozens than the A10 being elevated in that localized area going up and over the railway.
We've got to move on.
Okay, so I've shared now the interactive map at the most western point that this team covers. As you mentioned, Rupert, the A10 diversion here, both options showing for the road diversions, Newton, Harston. Should we pick it up from here?
Yeah, go on.
Take any questions? I mean, how does that work for everyone?
Sure, carry on.
I think it's important we hear from you, because if this format is not working for you, then we need to adjust it. But this is the first of many sessions we're going to be running. So just please feel free to fire out feedback and questions here, because If we can't answer it now, we can certainly come back to you, but we thought this would be the best way to tackle it, to bring the map up, to sort of walk you through the route. I've seen quite a few head shaking, so it'd be good to hear from you.
I'm happy to keep talking. It's just I didn't want to take the floor too much, to give you the opportunity to
Blake, can I find my mic?
I was going to say Helen has her hand up.
Yeah, got a hand up now, Helen. Oh, you're on mute, Helen.
I have my hand up, Don Bellamy.
Yes, you're number 2, John, I think. I'm sorry, I just don't understand this map at all. So it's not very clear to me, as I don't understand all the colours. I can't read the key because it's too small. So I live in Newton, or I represent Newton. There's reds and greens and yellows and all sorts going through. As you can say, as you've said, you've got these 14 considerations that have been looked at by experts, presumably consultants paid for by EWR. I don't understand at what point, other than this point, those 14 assessments are looked at from a local perspective either. So could you just explain what all these lines mean, please? Unless everybody else knows, in which case I will look at it later.
No, sure. So this, can you see the base? I've taken a lot of the colours off now. So the base map is what exists today. The red line shows the extent of East-West Rail for whatever we might require it for, either construction or permanent land take. And then if we put the colours back on, that starts to show the extent of the proposals. So, for example, from your perspective, Helen, the London Road going out of Newton to the north, this is our preferred option for road diversion back into Harston. So whilst there are a lot of colours, basically the road comes up and a new road would be taken along the line of the existing Shepworth line back into Harston. So we're showing 2 options here. Our preferred one is the one I just described. The backup option is the one shown here, which is the diversion via the A10. Is this all stuff that you're up to speed with, or do you want me to explain in more detail each of the options?
Okay with the options.
That's to Helen, really, I suppose, from the Newton perspective.
Okay, right. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, I have to say, but others are probably better up to speed with it. So I don't understand why there's a red line going right through Newton to the other end of Newton that East-West Rail need, and I don't understand why you say it's coming down the A10. I don't understand why there's a bridge going over by the farm, or something going over or under. And I also don't understand why at any point you haven't considered tunnelling under here, which would have stopped all these roadworks being done.
Okay, so maybe starting from the start. If we take these sign elements off, this is the East-West Rail line coming in on the blue, which cuts through the Station Road level crossing, which requires the level crossing to close. So the work we've been doing and shown on these plans is for maintaining the connectivity between the villages of Newton and Harston.
Yes, I understand that, because obviously our school is right on the other side of the level crossing, and our doctors and our church and our shops. So you're actually, cutting off our community, and Harston the other way round, because they come to our church and our pub and all that sort of thing. So I understand that, having done that, and I don't understand again why that couldn't have been a tunnel. You can't, I don't understand where the roads are all going. I don't understand why this bit of, there's all these lines, red lines coming off from the road that's going to Harston currently, and coming through Newton and ending at a sort of little square at the end of Newton. Why are you needing that if all the building and construction work is to the other side of us?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to specific elements, but this dogleg here is drainage for option 1. So whilst this map is useful in some ways, it doesn't. It does show everything.
But John, it does look as though your drainage is going uphill, if I'm right. Comment.
But to here,
Well, the two ponds, the two balancing ponds in near Newton, are uphill from where the main construction is.
these two.
Yeah.
They're the balancing ponds for the railways now. Adam.
No, those are the balancing ponds for the highway. So if you take the one on the left hand side, so the under option one, the route to cross over the railway, that road would need to be elevated in order to hit the rail line at height. That surface water from the highway drains into that attenuation pond, and then connects up onto there's an outfall at Hoffers Brook, just south of Newton. So that would involve some enhancements to the road and to the gullieway to then outfall into Hoffers Brook next to the pumping station. Similarly with the attenuation pond on that eastern side, under the option of option 4, again the road that heads north towards the railway, in order to have the connection with Shelford Road, which has an underpass, the road is elevated. So whilst presently, as the lay of the land is that it'd be perceived to be at the top of the hill, it'd be brought to be at level with the that southern abutment of that bridge, and that underpass would be a level with the attenuation pond. So you'd have flows heading down towards the south, and then like I said, using gullyways down towards an outfall at Hoffers Brook.
I've switched to the plan and profile drawings. These are also available on the website. It might be better to use these. They're less interactive, so it might take me longer to find stuff, but I don't know if this helps.
To help Helen, I don't understand. I did a degree in engineering, but I don't understand why you need that final red mark down the bottom end of Newton. Why you have to go all the way through Newton?
I did a degree in engineering as well, and I don't understand any of this. I don't understand what that thing is at the bottom of Newton. Hoffers Brook, as I understand it, is one of the precious chalk brooks in the UK, and was supposed to be protected up until 3 years ago. We were using, the Environment Agency was in there every winter clearing it out and trying to recover it. So I don't know, I'm not sure why things are now being fed into Hoffers Brook, but better than using our own driveways, I suppose.
I think Jack wants to come in on this. Apologies, Don. To let Jack come in on this point and then come to you.
Okay.
No, it was just a very quick one to say you're correct in the reason that is coming through Newton to the south to connect to the watercourse at the south of the village. That'd primarily be as part of option 1, but slightly part of option 4 as well. So there's no impact to the village of Newton in terms of construction works, etc. It'd just be a case of connecting into the existing outfall at the south of the village. But take on your point regarding the chalk stream.
Because I know, speaking from Harston, you're using Hoffers Brook in Harston as a runoff as well, aren't you?
On the western side of the A10, yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So are these, have you built into your costing the maintenance of these ponds? Because it's well known that maintenance balancing ponds around the M25 are not being maintained. There's been public outcry about it recently.
Into whole life costing, yes.
So what's the annual maintenance contract for these balancing ponds? Is it every year, every 3 years?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I don't think, Jack, unless if you know. Certainly no contracts have been let. We're in discussions with the future asset owners and therefore maintainers of said infrastructure, but we've used nominal industry costs from industry cost estimating tools for whole life costing of said assets, as we have done with all the other proposed assets that we've got along the line of the route.
With our experiences, it falls back on parish councils to do this work.
I think in these particular instances, it's local authority is what we're assuming with, because they are the maintainers and of the highway of London Road.
Unfortunately, they do a very bad job at the moment, so that's rather worrying.
Yeah, where we are since the development and publication of these drawings is there is a review of highways alignments and drainage provisions to minimize their impact. We think that there's a lot of opportunity to be able to do that. We're not there yet. I would have thought that in the next 6 months or so, we certainly will be, once we make it all work as a system-wide piece. And of course, we get the valuable feedback from people such as yourselves, local authorities, landowners, and whatnot, who obviously understand the lay of the land and of course some of the intricate issues you have here, whether it's with highways drainage or with use of land, etc. But it is this particular site is under review.
I'm just conscious that I think Don's been waiting a while. Don,
yeah, I'll pitch in here. Yeah, if we go back, you asked a question about the proposals over the A10, and I'll take a point in the earlier conversation that you brought the rail down to ground level. I'm not arguing that the railway should go over the top, but what does concern me is that very little is, if anything, is said about the impact. The actual bridge is very close to the edge of Harston. It's still got to work out just how high it's going to be. It's obviously going to be considerable height, particularly when you we get a lot of lorry traffic as well. And none of the impact of that in terms of noise and pollution is in any way described in the plan at all. I mean, it's going to be a huge structure literally as you come into Harston, and you will hear a lot of, it's inevitable. You hear the A10 now. If you stick it, I don't know what it's going to be, 40 foot in the air. I mean, what's the degree of increase in noise and pollution that will take place? And so, you know, when we're asked to comment on these things, you know, you're almost asking them in a single dimension when they're multi-dimensional problems. So I'd like to know what the impact of that bridge is going to be from all aspects, from pollution, from noise. What's it going to do to people's lives that they're going to have to put up with that construction? Why was it put so close to the edge of Harston?
I think Katie wants to come in here. Katie, just feel free.
Yeah, I was just gonna just give a sort of a general idea of the environmental impact assessment that we will be doing. So we will be doing a full environmental impact assessment, which is being carried out sort of from now onwards before we submit the application for development consent. So all of the sort of aspects that you're raising, Dom, would be presented within the environmental statement and any of those sort of associated assessments that have been done separately. So noise assessments, air quality, sorry, I should have said noise modelling, air quality, all of the different kind of surveys that we're currently undertaking as well would play into that environmental impact assessment that will be undertaken by the specialists.
So if I might just interject there, does that mean that the positioning as currently sits on the plan is devoid of that knowledge?
So What we would have done is done sort of a high level assessment, but the actual specific surveys, sort of noise modelling, pollution, not pollution modelling, air quality modelling and surveys will have not fed into this currently, this design. The design is still evolving, and on the basis of information that we get as a result of these assessments that are being undertaken by specialists.
So might those assessments ultimately require a repositioning of the current plan?
I mean, I couldn't say until those assessments have been done, I'm afraid.
What I'm saying is it possible that you would have to reconsider the route slightly if the impacts are sufficiently negative?
Well, we would have to assess the level of mitigation that would be required as a result of those assessments. So part of that assessment will be determining whether there's a significant impact, and then that significant impact the level of that impact will determine the level of mitigation that is required. Now, some of that that mitigation scale varies depending on your significant impact. In terms of what that would look like in this specific area, I wouldn't be able to say at this time because those assessments haven't been concluded. So, but we also have to consider it's not just the environmental impacts, there will also be engineering aspects that feed into that sort of mitigation and decision making. Very similar to how we've undertaken assessment factors, we've had to sort of done a whole sweep of all of the different technical disciplines, not just environment, that would interface with the design. Does that help?
Well, it just tells me the job isn't finished yet. So what we're proposing is it is incomplete, and I don't know how you can really expect people to make a balanced an objective response on something which is basically only partially considered.
I suppose at this point, Dom, and as they said at the beginning of this call, is that giving your feedback or your concerns is just as valuable as, obviously, as we go through this iterative design process. So any feedback that you have, it's not whether you, I mean, obviously there's an agree and disagree element to it, but anything that you have particular concerns about, if you feed that back through the consultation material, we can take that and look at that as part of how we develop the mitigation and how we go through iterative further design development. So I understand what you're saying, but also you play quite an important part in us developing the design further to mitigate for your concerns around pollution and noise, landscape and visual, those kind of things.
Okay, the only other thing, I mean, just broadening the point that we've had, we are engaging with residents on several levels. There's lots of feedback. And you mentioned, we've mentioned this evening, what are all these red lines? What are they? In terms of understanding the plans themselves, the vast majority of people, when they look at them, they're seeing a flat plan. They can't in their minds visualize exactly what it actually is going to look like. And there really needs to be far better visual understanding of what you're proposing. I mean, the overgauge railway, for example, is going to be a massive structure, and the I don't know, it works out about an 800-metre extra length of walk from Newton to Harston up this bridge you're considering. I mean, people can't really visualise what's that going to look like. Don't you think that you need to spend some time preparing far better visualisation for people to comment on?
I think I can jump in here, Katie, because we are looking at how we do that, and certainly as we move into the consultation, we certainly will have more stronger interactive visuals and maps and everything. And actually, there's been a lot of feedback on the map so far, and that's all gone back to the team. So we are in non-stat con. I do appreciate that you would prefer to have more now, but we certainly will have more when it comes to the consultation. So we're taking all that. Sorry, I'm just sorry, can I just pause you, Janet, because we do have some hands up, and I realise Richard's been waiting a while, so I need to go through So Richard, you're next here. So if you can jump in. Richard Cowling, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Really, it's picking up on the point about the mapping. I think I do understand the maps. And one thing I understand is the red lines are areas that you will need access to. Some of it you'll use temporarily and give back. Some of it you'll need permanently. Some of it you'll be digging trenches and covering it up. But for somebody who just sees that map with a red line going through their back garden or across their access path, it's absolutely terrifying. So what I would encourage the engagement team to do is look at this map as though they don't understand it, as though they've never seen it before. Because it's easy for the professionals in East West Rail to say, oh yeah, this bit means that, and dodge around here, and that's what it means. But people who are seeing it for the first time don't understand that. And I think actually some of what we've seen since, was it late November, has been quite damaging, because local residents see it and all they see is red lines going near or through their property. So please try and find a way to explain these maps a lot better. And it might be as simple as saying, this is land we want to use and we'll give back. This is land we need access to. It could be as simple as that. But take away the fear that a lot of residents have about what's coming. I mean, some of the fear is justified. I'm not giving you a carte blanche to say, well, it's all right with better maps, but please try and think, almost get somebody who's never seen them before to look at them before you publish them. Get some feedback that way. So really don't underestimate the impact you're having on people in the villages just by what you're publishing.
No, I mean, that's a really good point. I really appreciate it. We have tried. Jack shared some of the visualizations in the chat. First stabs really at showing in 3D what we are doing, but appreciate the point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback, and you're right. I mean, at the events themselves, we've got all of these maps available, but we appreciate that it's quite a lot to take in. So thank you, Richard. Really good. Peter, you're next in line here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm from Great Shelford, and we haven't got there yet, but hopefully my colleagues won't mind me asking this question. Dom asked a question earlier that I don't think was answered, but it kind of touched on something I've been thinking for quite some time. South Cambridgeshire is a very sparsely populated county. It's almost all fields with a few villages scattered here and there. I cannot understand why this railway, if it does need to come the route it's coming in, needs to get so close to any of these villages. Can you explain how and why we've arrived at this design, which is hugely disruptive all over the county, and as far as I can see it, unnecessarily so?
Good question.
Is there no answer to that question? Are we here? This is the most fundamental question I can think of, and there's no answer. We're down here, and you've directed us to ask a question about details, but this is a helicopter question. Why are we here?
So Peter, you're talking about the overall East-West Rail alignment coming from Bedford into Cambridge. Is that right?
No. I'm not
talking about how it is that we thread the railway through between the villages.
I'm saying South Cambridgeshire is a very sparsely populated county. It's mostly fields with a few villages scattered all over the place, with several miles between them. How have we arrived at a railway design which gets so close to these villages, so it's hugely disruptive for people once it's built and certainly during construction? Why have we not been able to design a railway that threads its way between the villages?
We believe that we have. So if you look at the line of the route from Camborne through to the Royston line, we have thread the railway in between villages, not through villages. Of course, there are some villages which are closer than others. You know, Comberton and Toft are much further apart than, say, Hawkston and Harston, or Harston and Newton. Similarly, if you start going further west towards Barrington, you know, there's that knock-on impact to Barrington and then others. We believe that we have done that. We've you know, in the past, prior to, you know, again, rewinding the clock several years to the alignments that were chosen, that the line of route avoids villages and avoids sensitive receptors. That was how East West Rail chose their route. It was to avoid impacting people's residents. It's to avoid impacting sensitive environmental areas, and this is the alignment that we've done. Of course, where there is not as wide a gap, you know, several miles between villages, where the line of route does need to take in order to join the existing rail infrastructure. That's where, you know, regrettably, in a way, you've got the railway which intersects between the villages of Harston and Newton.
Yeah, and I think I don't really want to spend too much time on this, because we have a route, we've had a route update announcement, we have a preferred route here. We are going to waste everybody's time if we just keep going back to why, you know, why the route, why that way. You know, we've covered that, and I appreciate that it's not, you know, everyone agrees with that, but I think we need to move that on, Peter. Unfortunately, we've got that route update announcement that came out the year before last, and again, it's backed up in this consultation doc. So if you're okay, I'm going to move us on. Lou Pedden, you're next. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm concerned when I look at the red line and the safeguarding map. Obviously, I'm concerned about a lot of it, or all of it really, but I'm particularly concerned about what state you'll leave the land in, because obviously you're going to use a lot of land for construction, for all kinds of things. And once this land, and I'm sure you've done surveys on our particular soil around here, we've got a thick layer of chalk not that far below the soil level, and really once that's all been churned up and damaged, it's not going to be farmable. It's not going to be, you know, you say that you'll use land and you'll give it back. I'm just really concerned about the state that this land will be left in, because there's a lot of our local farmland will have been damaged irreparably, really, once the chalk's all been turned. I don't know, are you aware of that? Is that something that you've looked at?
Yes, Lou. Yeah, we are aware. The topsoil is as little as 6 inches in some places. We have been speaking to major landowners and farmers in the area, really trying to get an understanding of how it is they use the land and the quality of the soil, the sensitivity of the soil, particularly in areas whereby we have temporary use for certain plots of land. There are measures that we can take to protect the soil in certain areas. We're not necessarily going to, and I'll be honest, we're not necessarily going to be able to do that across the whole piece. There will be inevitably some, you know, I don't like using terms such as, you know, collateral damage, but I'm being realistic and trying to set an expectation. There will be some areas that aren't able to be returned back to the use that they had, certainly not in a period of, you know, a few years. You know, soil such as some of the stuff that we got around Harston, and we're aware that if, you know, you plow too deep, you've rendered that field useless for 20 years. We are aware of that. We are very sensitive to that, and we are at every design iteration trying to minimize the overall impact, or at least contain the plots of land that we're using, to make them as concentrated as small areas as possible, rather than be as widespread and as damaging to a greater area as we possibly can. You know, we're trying to be compassionate to, you know, balancing the sensitivities between the existing land usage, possible future land usage, maintaining connectivity, and fundamentally still building an operational high-performance railway. It is a difficult balancing act. There are some things which will be irreversible, but it's not necessarily to say that they may not necessarily have other usage which come with benefit. It's that level of granular, meticulous detail which we are painfully aware of in some of the locations.
If I can just go in there, that, you know, I know that you say have other uses, but obviously one of the only of the uses really would then be to build on it, wouldn't it? And we're talking about a lot of land here, and it's I mean, the only other alternative is just the thought of all this beautiful countryside that we all enjoy living in just being scarred forever.
Well,
really, it's a
yeah.
serious damage to it.
I think and that's a fair and natural sort of fear and reaction to a change of land usage that actually it's just going to be concreted over and someone's going to build, you know, something on there. We're not the facilitators of that at all. What we are wanting to facilitate is the building of a high performance railway that, with additional, you know, tweaks and additions that we can make to design, maintains as much connectivity and creates a recreational space that, you know, we've got a commitment for 20% biodiversity net gain. That of course requires land in order for us to be able to achieve those sorts of targets. And so when there's a piece of land that may have a change of usage because, for example, at the moment it's high intensity farmed, you know, it's a rolling field, but actually, you know, once we come in there, we have it as a construction compound, and it's a small enough area that we're not able to protect it, or it doesn't warrant it because of the small nature of or size of the land, that you wouldn't be able to farm it, you know, to the same farming methods that you would do today. Its alternative use could be a recreational space provision, or it could be a biodiversity net gain space provision, you know, with replanting of suitable trees, plant and fauna which thrive in those sorts of soil conditions. So it's those are the kinds of things that we're looking at in areas that we cannot restore the land, protect it sufficiently, either because its size or its location, to work with the landowners and the stakeholders to try and get as much benefit from it, or rather, you know, or contain the negligible the negative potential perceived impact into the change of land of that use, change of use of that land.
I suppose to add, Adam, isn't it, since we've been allowed to go out and actually start talking to people by the government, we've done extensive meetings with landowners up and down the route, and we're building this picture. We don't know everything. We're building a picture of how the land is used. What are the, you know, local nuances? This is all stuff we're learning every day, and will be taken into account when we do revise the designs in the new year.
Yeah, thanks, John. That is a very valid point. We are, you know, John and I personally, and we talk about this every day, we are very relieved to be able to come to a group such as this and to show the work in progress that we've got, to try and state what it is that we are trying to achieve and where we're going with it, because up until very recently, we were not permitted to. With the constant change of government, it was very difficult for us to be able to share and openly speak about our developments. And thankfully, I think we're now seeing that in the past. And here we are now with, you know, take one of some proposals. And you know, what you see on the screen is, you know, I can say hand on heart, is not what will be built. It will be a variation of it. And hopefully with some of the feedback that we get from yourselves and the people that you represent, something that you know, there comes, dare I say, some benefit to it, or at least containing the perceived worst case damage that it could be if we just went hell bent on, dare I say, slapping this into the ground.
Thanks, Adam. I think we're back to Dom again. You got your hand up.
No, that was my original, but I do have one question, just leading on from what was just asked there in terms of the land. What commitment are you actually purchasing these large purple areas? I mean, does it belong to you, or is there an obligation for the original landowners to take them back, or what? What's the ownership status once the railway is built?
Well, there's different types of land take, from permanent, obviously, where the railway will be and will remain.
Well, obviously, yes, where you, but the surrounding areas. Well, put it another way, if it's no good for farming,
yes,
you presumably can't insist the farmer takes it back.
No, and this is the process we're going through at the moment, understanding through the process of, well, back in the autumn, farm business interviews, into meetings with local stakeholders, the usage of the land, access, everything else like that, and what that means for the specific land parcel, whether that can be returned after use, for example, as a construction compound for, say, 1 or 2 years. ideally we'd give the land back. We don't want to take land we don't want.
Yeah,
we're not
I
in the
mean,
business of doing
it's fairly. I mean, we're not against house building per se, but if I was a landowner with lots of land I can't use for farming anymore, and I could see a way of turning it into housing, I could still make a lot more money out of my land. I mean, aren't they going to just do that?
I think you'll find a lot of people holding land in this area to do precisely that in the future anyway.
And this will release it.
Not necessarily, no. If they're not able to continue their business, they have a case that we would have to compulsory purchase under blight, and then it fundamentally belongs to the government what they then do with it in terms of change of usage. They wouldn't necessarily automatically develop on it. But yeah, I think you'll find that a lot of the landowners in this area hold on to low value land precisely for that, whether that's in 10, 20, 50, 100 years time.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. Is it Richard? Got your hand up? Or, oh, sorry, Andrew. Andrew?
Yes, hi. Thank you. Just a continuation of that point, as I'm in Little Shelford, and if we just look at the area to the east of the M11, where there's the new road to be built, and then there is a temporary compound, it's coloured purple, but has little tree icons in it. So, you know, for example, that piece of land, you're characterising that as a piece of amenity land after the project is complete, and who would own it at that point?
So that entire plot is something that we're looking to acquire with compulsory purchase powers to primarily facilitate the road diversion over bridge such that we are able to close Hawkston level crossing. There will need to be a route of access for local authority to inspect and maintain the embankment and the abutments, and the bridge span is likely to be owned and maintained by Network Rail. But these sorts of conversations that we're having with these various bodies are ongoing, and there's no definitive lines as to who is going to own what. But there tends to be industry precedent when it comes to provision of highways, them either going to local authorities or them going to Highways England, dependent on the classification of the road, and their associated infrastructure provisions, such as in this case, you've got an attenuation pond on both sides, which is for the drainage of the abutments and of those civils features. The replanting that you see is there to offset some of the impacts of the construction and of the facility, and also to provide some further amenity. Whether that will become public open space, again, that's something that is subject to conversation and agreement with potential landowners. Again, in previous work that I've had, not to say that this will happen at this specific location, but land parcels such as this are quite often offered to local trusts to be able to own and look after and choose to have as, you know, and to use as they wish, whether that's as local amenity or otherwise. We're open to all ideas and proposals and suggestions. Nothing is set at the moment, but that land parcel is going to be acquired in full.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I've got a Richard next. Richard Cowling.
That's left over from last time, so pass on.
No problem. Rupert.
Thank you. Yeah, where you go through land which destroys the whole business, you typically buy it. I know in the cases of, if it's a commercial business, you actually end up having to buy it. If it's in the case of a farm, which you make it uneconomic, don't you have to buy the whole farm?
Again, there's a process that the Land and Properties team are undergoing, and there's information on the East West Rail's site where each site and each business is taken on a case-by-case basis. And yeah, if we are perceived to make their business non-viable, then yes, there are commitments that the East West Rail have to whether it's to purchase or to facilitate the relocation of said businesses, and those kind of conversations have been ongoing with the individual landowners as part of this consultation.
Well, I'm pleased to hear it, because we've got some very concerned farmers around Harston. But not only the farmers, we've got the school, and probably the surgery, and probably the pub in Newton, as well as the pub in Harston. All can see their trade disappearing, especially through the construction phase, if not beyond. This is very concerning, and you're really putting a nutcracker around the whole of the rural existence of Harston.
Can I just ask, have you got any views on the two options for road connectivity between the two villages?
Personally, I would have both of them, and I'd have Station Road back if I had given half a chance.
Yeah, second that.
We're looking for more connectivity. If you want to improve Harston, we want we have a higher than average age demographics for Harston. We would like to improve the number of children, not decrease it. Putting the squeeze around our school will probably kill it. That people will go to Triplo rather than to Harston. And the same goes for other activities as well. And I think the whole thing calls for a scandalous way of treating a rural village. It's not rural at all. It's not going to be rural after anyway.
I think we're talking two rural villages here, aren't we? It's not just Harston, it's obviously Newton as well, and we are very connected, as we've said, for all the businesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
of course.
If I can just say, with option one, my concern is really that I mean, I don't think either of them are great options for Newton or for Harston, as Rupert said. If you go down to option one, it's very, very hard to turn right onto the A10. That'd be a very dangerous junction. I know that you've got to do more traffic surveys there, I've been told that, but if mums are trying to get that way to school and turning right when that's such a major road, the A10, and also trying to get to the doctors or anywhere really, it's not going to be a safe junction to do that. The other thing that would do from Newton's point of view is it could turn Newton into a rat run, is they could then completely bypass Harston, which they often do anyway when Harston's backed up with traffic, but more cars are more likely to come coming over that hill because they won't have had to have gone into Harston. They won't have to risk getting stopped at the railway station and then cut through the village that way. If I go to option 4, although that makes Harston Road, which option 1 goes off, that makes Harston Road a cul-de-sac basically. But then option 4 just puts all the traffic, a lot of traffic and pressure onto Cambridge Road. We're a tiny village. We've got about 400 people live in our village. And those options are just going to turn our tiny little village into a major road. The traffic is going to be just unbearable, really, if you put it all on the one road. So for me, and I think for the Newton residents, neither of those options are really good options at all for us.
I mean, can I just ask a question generally? Have you had discussions at the county level about the planning for these villages, these local villages, which are going to be massively impacted by this?
We have regular touch points here with county colleagues.
Would you like to share with whom? Because we are here, we have county councillors who are fully aware of our views, and we've raised questions, but we haven't got any answers yet.
The specific officers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share them.
Well, I think it would help the process if we could, because we can then discuss what the greater impact and what the support would be for these villages at county level if they're going to go through with, if you're going to go through with it.
Sure, and this is what we were discussing earlier actually, and be interesting. We were actually interested to get your feedback as to how you do interact with those levels of government, because we weren't quite sure. So we're trying to engage as many people as possible, but how you interact with certainly county would be interesting. If you had any feedback on that, do you have regular meetings with officers?
No,
not at county level, no.
No.
No, we don't. In fact, without actually naming names, there was one very senior person who said to a colleague, the East West Rail isn't coming that close to Harston, is it? So that's a bit worrying. So no, they're not in touch with us properly at all.
Okay, so when we've got nominated officers from County Council, City Council, South Cambs, Share Planning, and the combined authority. So we meet with them monthly. I can't see any reason why not to share the names, but that's our regular touch points.
And they've done nothing to reach out to the villages at all. We haven't had any contact at all regarding this, either from county or district, you know. That we just feel. We had a county councillor at our village meeting a few weeks just before Christmas, really, which a couple of the members from Harston came to. And the first time we'd seen him, the first time we talked about it, he was very dismissive and unopen to really listening to the residents' questions at all. And he got a lot of people really quite frustrated with his responses, really, that it's going to happen and the government support it and that's the end of it, really. So from community's point of view, from our point of view, it's all really disappointing that the process is being, we feel that we're being done at, really, not happening. It's not happening with us, you know. Can I just go back to the roads though? Is there no way, I've talked about the issues that we'd have in Newton with both options. Is there no way that there could be a bridge and Harston Road could just stay open as it is? I know that the railway is really wide at that point, but you are putting a very long sort of footpath bridge over, which is almost going to double the distance. If we walked from Newton to Harston, that footbridge is practically doubling the distance from us to Harston, which might be fine on a bike, but I think for pedestrians, people walking, that would make it an awful long walk. Is there no way that a bridge has a bridge been looked at, just continuing Harston Road over, starting further up?
A while back, yes. I say a while back, probably about 2-3 years ago. The elevation of that bridge would be something that I think, understandably, everybody would be up in arms about.
Is that because of the width of the road? Is that because of how wide it is? Right.
Sorry?
Okay. That's because of how wide it is it?
That's because of how wide and the nature of the railway junction. It's a grade separated, so that you've got a pair of lines that go over a set of lines which are at ground level. We have tried to tuck it into the hillsides to make it as aesthetically less intrusive as possible. So we've tried to use the topography, certainly from the Newton side.
I won't make you explain all that. I appreciate.
Yeah, that's fine.
It would be an
absolute. Right. It would be an absolute monstrosity, and the likelihood is that we'd have to acquire a large number of properties, almost as far up as the school itself, in order to create the approach into said bridge.
I think I wasn't very clear with my question. I think what I meant to say was there no way that I mean, I'm sure you would look to that anyway. I guess I'm trying to say I'm just disappointed that they couldn't have been merged sooner, so that they were less of an impact when they got to that junction. And they'd sort of, but I appreciate that the plans have got where they are now, and I guess you have your reasons for doing that. But just take on board our concerns for what both routes really do for Newton. The best option would be probably for both of them. It would be the less impact for Newton and the benefit both villages the most.
Okay, we've got a lot of people. Sorry, Rupert, we've got a lot of people with their hands up. There's 7 people now, so I'm going to have to go through them. So next here we've got Glenn, who's been waiting quite a while.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, well, Lou has answered some of the questions or asked some of the questions I was going to do, but I want clarification. You've been showing the map, which I think Helen was first mentioned, and it's showing both options 1 and 4 combined. But is that a proposal you may think of? That was question 1. And the second question is, I think one of your colleagues said that the road coming from Cambridge Road to Harston, which is the option 4 one, would be raised to be the same height as the current mound that we've got, or the hill going out. So it'd be almost level with that all the way down into Harston, therefore needing the balancing pond. Can you clarify that is correct, that you would have the vehicles up that high?
So if I answer the second one first, Jack, feel free to pitch in if I got it wrong. A bridge over the railway at that location is, broadly speaking, 10 meters in the air. The peak of the hill, broadly where the balancing pond is currently, as of today, in today's lie of the land of Cambridge Road, is about 10 meters. So the highest points of the bridge and the approach to the bridge that goes over the railway is 10 meters in the air, so broadly similar to that which is the crest of the hill at the moment.
Okay, so you are saying it will be parallel to the crest of the hill at the moment, and then just come down as it passes over the railway line into Harston. therefore the need of the balancing pond.
Yeah.
Could
But
you,
like I said earlier on, this area is under review, and from a personal perspective, and I think Jack shares my views, it's a suboptimal design, and it's on the cusp of being altered such that there is less of there's less civil engineering works in that area, and less of a footprint of the infrastructure you got there, you know, with the underpass going in under the raised Cambridge Road, and then peeling south to join back into the Cambridge Road at that T junction. That's something that we're targeting to refine / remove.
Yeah, that sounds more encouraging. So going back to my first one, we had option 1 and 4 transposed on the same map. Is that a realistic option that you would consider, irrespective of the points that was made, obviously, by Lou about the junction, etc., on the A10?
Yeah, so it wasn't precisely them both being transposed on the same map, John. If you're controlling it, if you were to scroll up to option 1, so the existing Royston line alignment in this design is not repurposed to become a highway. It is either returned to natural growth or potentially used as an active travel corridor. What we're proposing under option 1 is to actually convert that into a highway. So that's the minor differences you see between the two sheets, which is on that option it's a highway, and on the other option it's just an active travel route. So obviously without the south to west spur that then connects onto the A10 with the overbridge. So it's option 1 is substantially more infrastructure, more impact into land usage. Obviously comes a greater construction and cost impact than option 4, which is a lot more compassionate to the amount of land that is taken, the amount of bridges, and of course forced change of land usage.
Yes, but as I think Lou said, on this option, it's likely to increase the traffic flow through Cambridge Road quite significantly, and may even increase the current rat run. So I think you need, in your surveying, it's all very well to survey the current traffic, but as many big road networks have proven, once you've done something different, then you need to predict what the possible road traffic implications will be as a result of the work. And I haven't seen a project yet that ever considers that in great detail, but let's hope your one will be a bit different.
Ben, possibly you can comment on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, can I quickly come in on this? So I'm Ben Nicholas. I lead on the traffic and transport of East West Rail, predominantly focusing on the impacts on the highway network. So just in terms of forecasting the impacts of East West Rail, we do have a suite of modelling tools that sit behind the design. So we have a 2023 year model that in effect reflects what the current road conditions are on the road network at the moment. So we've undertaken a suite of road traffic counts across the route that in effect helped us build that model. We've then forecast that model out to 2034, which is in effect the opening year, and then 2049, which is the design, what we call a design year. And the reason why I go to 2034 is to make sure we accommodate all the additional background growth that's going to take place without East West Rail. So when people think about the scheme and their village and their location now and how bad it is, they don't appreciate that by 2034, even without East West Rail, there's going to be lots of economic and housing potential that comes forward that adds to the congestion and the issues within the local environment. And then all the way out to 2049, where we've consulted the local plans and the local authorities to understand what their certain or near certain developments are and coming forward. We call that our uncertainty log. And then what we do at 2034, we then overlay the preferred East West Rail route on top of that. So then we can understand what impacts East West Rail have had on the local area in terms of where the induced demand from East West Rail is coming to and from. And that's what we're looking at doing. We're looking at mitigating those aspects. What happens without East West Rail is just sort of creating that new sort of baseline. So we are forecasting into the future, and we are considering background growth and economic opportunities. Obviously, modelling is only as good as models are perfectly mathematical models. They don't necessarily account for, I suppose, the irrationality of human behaviour, but it's a good benchmark and a good tool to help us be able to start to develop and evolve our designs and mitigation measures going forward.
Okay, can I just ask you one question about that before I depart from this conversation? When you're doing this modelling, are you doing it on the time factor, i.e. between sort of 7 and 9 in the morning and 3 and 6 in the afternoon? The traffic flow is considerably heavier on Cambridge Road than it is. So if you were going to average it out over a 24-hour period, it wouldn't seem very high. But if you were to look at it in those tight, the busy parts, the traffic flow is quite significant. Do you take that into consideration in your modelling? Is the question.
We do, yes, we do. So we have AM peaks, interpeak and PM peaks, and we've in effect undertaken traffic counts over sort of those all day traffic flows to understand what the peaks are on the road network at that time. So they do vary across the road network, but traditionally it's going to be between 7 and 9, and 7 and 10, and 4 and 7 for the AM and PM peaks, and the interpeak we take as a average between those 2 hours. We do capture the peaks and troughs, and we also do those traffic counts at neutral months to exclude any time where the traffic is going to be elevated because of potentially school holidays, or even drops because of school holidays and sort of Christmas and things like that.
All right, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. That was a good point to debate there. Thanks, Ben. I think Janet, you've been waiting a while. Sorry, do you want to come back in then?
Sorry, just drawing a few other points together. Lou, back to your original point about option 1 versus 4. 4 was developed in response to feedback we'd received on 1, as you highlighted, the right turn onto the A10. But the consultation's asking for feedback on 1 or 4, not both. I don't think there's any scenario where we build both.
Can I just ask on 4? Is there a feedback from Hawkston as to the use of Donkey Lane, and if Donkey Lane is that little bit on the roundabout on London Road?
Yeah,
familiar with it. We've got a live piece of work starting in February that's looking at active travel and recreational route enhancement. Donkey Lane is very much in our minds to protect and link up with other possible routes that the options could provide. So yes, we're aware of it. We've heard loud and clear at some of the consultation events, and prior to that about the benefit and enjoyment of Donkey Lane, and we're looking to potentially enhance circular routes and connectivity, which also involves Donkey Lane.
That's part of the reason for our preferring option 4. You bring in connectivity from Donkey Lane south to Newton, where you don't have that at the moment. Because
but my experience is that active travel routes and road routes don't necessarily coincide and don't make for happy bedfellows. Because actually getting around to the school, one of the comments we've had is people do not like walking down the A10.
I'm very relieved that you're not going to interfere with Donkey Lane, because it's outside the red line. So that was good. I wonder whether you had considered making a model to make the maps more easy to understand.
Yeah, and again, I picked up on this earlier. I think we're taking all the feedback away from this consultation. As we go to the next consultation, we'll certainly look at how we can bring these maps more to life and make them more accessible to everybody. We're appreciating that we need to think about that. Before I do move on, has anybody else got any comments around what we've been talking about that's got their hand up? Because it'd be good to just get that covered now. If not,
I would also like to say, do you know what Hawkston Junction is? You've got it written somewhere, and it's way out of this area.
Sorry, can you explain?
Sorry, Jenny. Yeah.
Hawkston Junction's in Harston, actually, isn't it?
Yes, it's a river. It's
Hawkston Junction is technically the rivers.
Join.
Well, the rivers join.
That's good to know. On the project team, we refer to Hawkston Junction being the junction of the railway. So broadly, everything west of the M11 through to where the Royston line rejoins its existing alignment and up as far as the A10 overbridge on the East West Rail route. But take your point that Hawkston Junction is locally known as the joining of two watercourses. We will reference that and make sure that there's clear distinguishment between the two features, whether it's a railway feature or a watercourse feature.
Thank you.
I think the numbers are a bit mixed up here. Andrew, is that a new hand or is that the old hand?
Yes, it isn't.
It's a new hand.
It's a new hand. Yeah, so you talk about active travel. I mean, so would you consider investing in areas which are not necessarily going to be touched by the project for purposes of improving active travel? For example, just at the top of my head, making it possible to have a cycleway or something like that alongside the existing railway line going east from the going east from the level crossing in Hawkston on Hawkston Road. So not something that's directly impacted by the project, but where there are, there is an existing permissive path coming through which connects Great Shelford and the A10 at Hawkston Mill that are actually people use and could be enhanced, particularly for access to for example, Cambridge South Station, if we went that far.
I'm smiling, Andrew, because I like your thinking. Just that this Christmas blockade, whilst the railway was closed, John, Jack and I spent 3 days walking through the full site, and that was precisely one of the things that we were potentially looking at. So the question is, could we look into it? The answer is yes, absolutely. We are doing so. What does it look like at the moment? Again, we've set up a piece of study work to crack on from as soon as the consultation closes at the end of this month. So we'll crack on beginning of February to look at the connectivity of certain areas, either through use of permissive paths, public rights of way, green lanes, other provisions that we provide. It's something I'm personally quite excited by. And yes, it's something that you're not the first nor the last person to raise it. And across the whole East West Rail corridor, it's something that East West Rail is actively looking at to see how we can use the rail corridor that we're either providing or enhancing, and see whether or not there is some additional benefit to leisure leisure walkers or active travellers, if for commuters on bicycles and what have you, whether or not we're able to enhance that experience. So yes.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm not quite sure where you wanted to get to on your agenda, but just going back to the document that you sent out last week, I think it was, and in the section you talked about session 1, connectivity, Hawkston level crossing closure, the 2 proposed options. I'm not quite sure what the 2 proposed options are, unless it's with the footbridge or without the footbridge.
That's precisely
it. I think we had decided to do 2 sort of sessions within this session, but I think we're kind of merging into the same now. I'll leave that with you, John and Adam, to pick up if you want to just go into that now.
So on the screen, this is the single option we're proposing for road diversion, which would have a footpath cycleway alongside it. The optionality we're including in the consultation is for this footbridge at the location of the existing crossing, inclusion or not.
So there would be a alongside the road there would be something for pedestrians.
Segregated, segregated mixed use non-motorized users, so pedestrians, cyclists, leisure walkers on the eastern side of that overbridge. That involves a little bit of pavement enhancements on Shelford Road, on the northern side of it, to connect into to the existing paved area, so that you can essentially take the inside. If you're going from Little Shelford to Hawkston, you take the inside or the eastern side of the A10. So the eastern side, not of the A10, of the overbridge, that then takes you to the southern part of the M11. So we feel that for those commuting or travelling from Little Shelford to Hawkston, the distance, the increase in distance is negligible, given that the footbridge would need to be a ramped footbridge, and so there's little benefit there. I think those that would be biggest impacted by increased distances would be those that live immediately adjacent to the existing level crossing, that would want to go quite literally to the other side of the level crossing, who would be the most impacted from that. But yes, there is a segregated walking route on the eastern side of that bridge.
And sorry, that is definitely in plan.
That is in our base
not
plan, 100%. Yes, that's not an option.
So you're
that
planning not to have a footbridge?
Our question that we've got two options. Option for the footbridge at the level crossing. The option is yes, a footbridge, a ramped footbridge, or no footbridge.
Right.
Thank you.
From a personal perspective, admittedly, I don't live in Little Shelford or Hawkston. I do frequent the site very regularly. This is fundamentally going to be a railway footbridge in a small, in a village, or on the outskirts, in particular of Little Shelford. So, is that something aesthetically that is warranted? And does the benefit of providing that offset the aesthetic impact that said footbridge would provide? I would argue not, but as I said, I don't live in either of the two villages, and this is where we really do seek the views and opinions of those that would use it or would have to look at it, dare I say, every day.
I'm just going to intercept here, because I'm aware that we've got 20 minutes left and quite a few hands up, and I don't really want to rush conversation, but do you mind if I just pause for a second? I realise that, Janet, you were next, but you've suddenly gone to number 7, so I don't know what happened there. Or was it an old hand? Did you have another question?
An old hand, yes.
It was an old hand, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, absolutely.
Now, obviously, I'm interested in this level crossing, because I feel that quite likely the village will much prefer having a footbridge, rather they'd have to go a long way to use the new road.
Okay. Sorry, Penny, I realise you've been waiting a long time. I'm just going to quickly try and get through these as fast as we can, and then we've got some time at the end. So, Penny.
Hi. Thank you. I wonder if your slides could show up option 1 of the technical drawings. This question is probably for Adam, but based on what Jonathan was saying, that the connection from Newton to Harston would be an either or, not both option 1 and option 4. I wanted to throw a spanner in the works and ask the question about Baggott's Farm Overbridge, which kind of came up in almost, I think, in the old option 3, and I just wondered whether there was a reason that's not obvious to me that that's now been dismissed, in terms of if there was only one way of having the connection, rather than cutting right across the countryside, and rather than having a huge embankment creating purely a footbridge / cycle path in the middle of nowhere over 3 or 4 tracks of railway. I just wondered whether there was still an option that somehow that option 1 could cut across and go over Baggott's Hall Farm overbridge and come back out right on Station Road by the school without having to go as far as the A10. It's probably a silly question. I'm so
Not at all.
sorry.
Not at all.
Good question.
Quite good question. Quite studious. Yes, it was one of the options, and you might be right. It might have been option 3. It's in the technical note. The details, I believe. Jack, feel free to interrupt me if I've got that wrong.
No, that's right.
Yeah. We did look to utilise, in inverted commas, Baggott's Farm accommodation bridge as part of the alternative connectivity. What it did mean is that you've got substantial embankments and raised highway in order to make that connection. However, an accommodation bridge is easily navigatable by agricultural traffic with steep gradients. A roadway would need to be a much flatter gradient, which then means that the bottom of the bridge on the eastern side lands what we suggested would have to be a roundabout immediately outside of the school. That primarily did a couple of things. Environmentally, it was not a good look. The amount of braking in and accelerating just outside of school, deemed to be a sensitive receptor, was something which shied away from. The busyness of that road and that junction immediately outside of the school, we perceived to present a safety concern by utilising that particular route. It is summarised in the technical note, I believe. It was not as well performing as option 4, albeit it was a slightly shorter route, so it did have some benefit to it. But on the overall quantum of disadvantages, we felt that it was more disadvantaged than say option 4, which currently is our internal preference. But of course, it's options 1 and 4 that we're floating. It's not to say, as far as the pedestrian crossing is concerned, again, this area is under tweak review, and there is still some possible views as to whether or not the Newton footbridge could be accommodated in a slightly different way. We think its location and its connectivity benefits that it has with the the reprovision of an active travel corridor on the existing Royston line means it's probably in there or thereabouts its optimum position. But the exercise hasn't been completed as yet, so looking at an alternative crossing point, particularly including using Baggott's Farm with a slightly smaller bridge instead of going over 4 tracks, as you say, is something that we still needs to conclude. But if I was a betting man, I'd say it would be as you see on the screen. But then the accommodation bridge potentially gets removed because of its limited benefit and usage to the land users.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that answered it.
Can I pick up a point there, please, Sarah? You referred to a 4-track bridge. Is there 4 tracks at the accommodation bridge, or is it 3?
The accommodation bridge, it's 3. No, actually, it's presently 3. I expect it to be 2.
Can you expand on that? Because I'm interested why you've got 3 tracks. Because since about a year ago, we've suddenly got to 4 tracks going through Harston, and passing loops euphemistically look like freight loops to me.
They are passing loops, not exclusively for freight, but they are passing loops. There's one in the eastbound direction, a westbound direction. So as the design that we see at the moment, the first passing loop in the westbound direction starts west of the M11. So at the intersection point here, you have the SBR line going over 2 westbound east-west rail routes. And on the eastbound side, there are two east-west rail lines. They then the eastbound loop then converges into a single line broadly at Baggots Farm Accommodation Bridge, and then so at Baggots Farm there are 3 tracks headed towards Chapel Hill. I expect that passing loop to be shortened north of the A10, so that at Baggots Farm you'll have 2 tracks. We do still need an eastbound passing loop, and that would start east of Baggots Farm.
So I see from the environmental impact assessment that if we parking freight trays are likely to be assessed as going at night mainly, and therefore you'll be changing over from action to inaction in the middle of the night.
Can we go back to that? Because I really want to go.
Yeah,
Adam, I think freight is a whole other
impact on the whole village.
It is, but freight isn't going to be sat idling at night. Freight tends to travel at night because it's got clear passage. And in any case, 2 freight trains a day, which are currently timed services, which go from their existing routes at the moment, which go via North London line. They would be rerouted onto here, but they are fitting within normal passenger hours rather than middle of the night.
We can't guarantee that, though, can we?
But we don't have any more on that at the moment, do we, Adam? At the moment, that is what we know about our freight plans.
At the moment, we've got 2 freight trains a day, which we're diverting from Thames Gateway through to Oxford via East West Rail route. Yeah.
Ray, I think Ray, you've been waiting a while. You're next.
Can I quickly go back to the bridge?
Can we just let Ray make his point?
Well, I'm going to leave if you do. I've been waiting quite some time.
Go Ray. It's fine. Go for it.
Look, I haven't heard very much at all about how you're going to manage the construction impacts through this process, and that's one of the really key things that's worrying tremendously local communities. Nor have I heard you say much actually about the Foxton level crossing, which anybody coming here thinking about joined up thinking for the infrastructure is going to say, anyone knows that the impact of the Foxton level crossing is really significant on the main arterial route into Cambridge. But it has some real benefits associated with it as it currently is, because I'm sure members from Harston will say it does actually break up the traffic coming in on the A10. And in Barrington, what we find is that the level crossing at Shepworth has a real beneficial effect in slowing down the traffic coming into Barrington through that route. Now, over the Christmas period, I think, as you heard, the Foxton level crossing was closed. And as a consequence, Barrington became quite a rat run. Although major traffic was tried to be directed on the A505, we still had a tremendous amount of local traffic coming through Barrington, which has one of, if not the longest village green in England. Traffic absolutely belting through the village. And so the management of the construction impacts is going to be really key to getting local communities to think that there is something worthwhile in supporting in this process. So alongside of that, people locally also know that the Foxton level crossing can be a complete pain when Cemex are bringing its trucks through for filling in the Barrington quarry. So are there proposals to use the material produced by tunnelling through Chapel Hill to actually fill in the quarry and get contracts into filling in the quarry more quickly to reduce some of the disruption which the current process of filling in the quarry is causing tremendous anxiety to people and users of the A10 at the moment?
Okay, I'll try and rapidly go through those. first of all, I am an admirer of Barrington Green. I see it quite a lot, and you're right. It's impressive. During the closures, yes, Foxton Level Crossing was closed. That's because they were renewing the actual decking and the track underneath it, which yeah, marvelous stuff. We're not impacting Foxton Level Crossing at all. There is no rail operational impact or highways impact for anything that East West Rail are proposing. Same goes for Granham's Level Crossing, which is next to Shepherd Branch Junction. The doubling of the twin tracks on approach to Shepworth, anything that's diverging on the King's Cross route will not activate the barriers. If anything, there might be a substantially lower mounted barrier downtime because
no,
of,
sorry, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Is it the
so as far as
disruption to the A10 during the construction will have an effect upon?
Yeah. So in our statutory consultation, we are mandated to provide a code of construction practice documentation, which exactly how everything is going to be built, exactly what provisions it's going to need to be made, and what mitigations will be put in place, including construction haul routes. Filling the use of Barrington Quarry to fill with spoil. Actually, some of the spoil that's coming out of Chapel Hill is going to be reused elsewhere on the infrastructure to rebuild, so it's not immediately going to waste. It's only going to be the top layers of fill that are deemed to be unusable, that would end up needing to go to a fill site. And yes, Barrington is a location that East West Rail route wide are looking at potentially utilising. How it gets there, whether it gets there by road or using the GBRF GB Rail freight service into Barrington Quarry is part of a conversation, a live conversation that East West Rail are having with both CEMEX and with GBRF. So yeah, it's a consideration, but there's nothing set in stone at the moment. That will all come about in our COCP at statutory consultation.
Okay, thank you.
And just to quickly add around impacts on construction on the strategic road network and local roads, we have a 2032 model that we're using as well, which we're forecasting is going to be in effect peak construction at the moment for East West Rail. And on top of that, we are overlaying the working assumptions around the construction routes to understand where the pinch points are going to be on the network, where the hotspots are, and we're going to work alongside the local authority and the highways authority to understand what the mitigation measures can be, which are going to be both temporary and permanent. We'll be looking at permanent mitigation measures if their intervention is going to have to take longer than 6 weeks. At the statutory consultation, there'll be a lot more information around those routes and the impacts and the duration of that. Because the construction logistics plan is a continuing sort of development as we speak, as we look at the optioneering and how we sort of settle on the preferred route, because that obviously has an impact on how we construct, and then the amount of HGVs and the routing and the access and the spill and all those sorts of things. So we do have a model, it's being modelled, and those mitigations are going to be shared with you.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Ben. I've seen plenty of models in my career of that type. And we had significant amount of work done of traffic modelling for the very large housing development that we've had on the CEMEX site, and it really doesn't come to pass. So we approach those with a great deal of how can I put it, skepticism. But we'll have a look. Thank you.
Sorry, I just realised we've got just over 5 minutes left. A good comment from Peter in the chat just around Great Shelford. Is it worth you, Adam or John, just covering that very quickly, and then we can just hopefully get to the last few questions?
Go on, John. Slopey shoulders time.
Sure.
Or is there anything in particular, Peter, about Great Shelford that you want to feedback on?
Well, we have lots of questions, but we don't have time to do them, I don't think. Certainly myself and my colleague Malcolm would be interested to hear what you have to say.
Would you want, I mean, you want a quick overview of the proposals?
Well, I can just dive in with my questions if you like.
That's probably best use of time, isn't it?
Okay. If you could zoom in on the area at all Shepworth Branch Junction to start off with, please. There's one concern we have is the deviation of the DNA cycle path around a new balancing pond. I'm not sure, how much have you spoken to Greater Cambridge Partnership, because this deviates significantly from their plan for the Sawston Greenway, which goes through there?
No, I don't understand that. Yeah, we have regular catch-ups with the project manager. Do appreciate, yeah, it's they're coming way in advance of our proposals. We have tried to align where we can, but it's going to be rework in this area, unfortunately.
Why do we need that balancing pond when there's very little work being done to the railway in that area?
Holland, Adam.
Yeah, the drainage system in the area is suboptimal, particularly on the Royston side. Again, as a live piece of work, we're trying to determine optimization of what provisions that we would need to make south of Hobson's Brook in this area, and sizing attenuation pond accordingly for the junction. So it's because we're realigning the western pairs of tracks, or the SBR alignment on approach into Shepherd Junction, that tends to trigger a higher level of modern standard compliance, and therefore at this stage, early stage in design development, we need to make adequate drainage provision as part of our designs, but it's something that gets optimized and reviewed as we progress through single option and detailed design over the next couple of years.
We were wondering if you could move that balancing pond to the other side of the railway, because the new alignment to the DNA path there is suboptimal for cyclists. Let's put it that way.
I think the best thing that I can say at the moment is, Peter, it's under review. And there's a couple of people on this call on the East West Rail side who are regularly querying this particular junction and some of the infrastructure provisions that we've got here. Yeah, it's under review, and yeah, we are absolutely clear on what the Sawston Greenway proposals are by GCP. There is going to be some rework in the area, whether it's the attenuation pond, whether it's maintenance construction compound, or whether it's a permanent maintenance facility in the just off Granham's Road. There will inevitably be some change, but at the moment, with the designs that we've got, this is the as localized as possible changes to the DNA path that we can provide.
Just to build on Adam's point, Peter, on the western side, the reason, that we've not went that side initially is due to the presence of the scheduled monument. So we're in conversation with Historic England to understand the extent of the scheduled monument. But that's why it's on the eastern side at this point in time.
The scheduled monument comes nowhere near Shepherd's Branch Junction. It's a good half a kilometre further up the track. Anyway. The footbridge across the railway there, it looks like you're proposing to remove it. Have I read that?
Correct.
Can you find a way of putting it back, please?
Yes, it will be wider. It's being removed because it's not wide enough, because it's presently suitable for 3 tracks. We need it to be a 4-track span, so it'll be a wider footbridge.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's a bit of relief.
Potentially relocated, not far, but or orientation change. But we understand it's a public right of way that used to go across Webster's number 2 level crossing, and it was put there once the level crossing was closed by Network Rail. So we need to maintain that connection.
Yeah, it connects 2 public rights of way. When it comes to the construction phase, the suggestion has been that you've got quite frankly an enormous compound here. That's a huge field. And actually, the parish council owns a strip of land that borders it on the bottom of the picture here. The suggestion is that you want to bring traffic down the A1301 Cambridge Road to get to that compound. Our strong suggestion is please don't. It's a highly residential area. It's already an incredibly busy road. Can you please consider bringing the construction traffic up the A1307, which is a much faster, busier, well-maintained road, and and then over the hill to that compound.
Noted. May I invite you to put that in your consultation feedback, please? Yes, I've taken a note, and we'll take that away. All of the purple areas in our plans for construction logistic compounds tend to be a direct response to the infrastructure proposals that are made. You can appreciate in this corridor there's a limit on the land that is available, whether it's because it's protected or it's already under development. They will want, as the design gets tweaked, shall we say, and reviewed, the construction logistics areas also get reviewed. So in terms of size, it may not necessarily be the same expanse. It might be a slightly different shape, or potentially even a slightly different location. But I warmly invite that comment about construction routes in, if you have a particular insight or flavour to it. But yes, I'm aware of the Cambridge Road and the connection into Granham's Road. It's not a great junction just off that southern part of the bridge.
No, it's not.
I'm going to have to step in. I'm so sorry, but I have to be strict with our timing because the whole team are also on the road again tomorrow. I realise that there's 2 questions we haven't answered. I would encourage you to email them to me and I can pass them to the team.